Lisa Combs, and this week on Behavior Bites, we're going to be talking about a concept called intermittent reinforcement. And any of you who have ever been to a casino, maybe you've been to Las Vegas, maybe you've been to one of the casino boats, or maybe you've just bought scratch-off lottery tickets at the grocery store, or participated in a raffle at church. Anytime that you are engaging in one of those kind of traditional gambling scenarios, you're engaged in a game of intermittent reinforcement. If every single time we pulled the slot machine lever, we got a nickel back. We put a nickel in, and every time we pulled the lever, we got a nickel back out. It would get boring. It would get very predictable. Or even if we got, let's say they were set up so that every time we put a nickel in and we pulled it, we got 10 cents back. But it happened every single time. Eventually, we would reach what's called satiation, which means if I know it's going to be here every single time, then eventually I'm going to go to the bathroom, or I'm going to go and hit the buffet and get my crab legs, because I know it's going to continue when I get back. So we've reached a point where we're taking it kind of for granted if it's every single time. On the other hand, if we hit the slot machine and we plunk nickel after nickel after nickel after nickel in all night long, and nothing ever comes back to us, we're going to probably never ever go do that again, because there wasn't enough of a payoff for us. It just never ever paid out. So the most powerful kind of reinforcement is reinforcement that is not every single time and is variable. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, because that keeps us guessing, and it keeps us thinking that the reward might be coming just around the corner. Now, of course, it has to occur frequently enough that it keeps us motivated, especially if something is new to us and difficult to us. So weight loss is another great example of something that is kind of naturally intermittent reinforcement. When we go on a new diet and exercise plan and we get on the scale, we kind of never know whether it's going to go down a little bit, maybe up a little bit. Oh my gosh, now it's down a whole lot. That's intermittent reinforcement. And if we don't get reinforced frequently enough, if we get on the scale too many times and no weight has come off, we're not going to stick with that behavior plan. And so that weight loss plan, which is a behavior plan, we're not going to stick with that plan and with the behaviors that it requires of us if we're not getting rewarded frequently enough. But we don't necessarily get rewarded at the same pace, in the same chunks, at the same time, all the time. That's what keeps it motivating. And so when we're at that slot machine, everybody's been there who's tried a slot machine, and maybe you're one of the smart people who've never done that. But sitting at a slot machine, what you do is you plunk in a nickel and it doesn't return anything, and you plunk in another nickel and it doesn't return anything. You do that several times, and then you plunk another nickel in, and you hear cha-ching, 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 and suddenly you've won $2.50. And you go, whoa, in the space of 5 minutes, I just, increased my winnings so much, so I'm going to plunk another nickel in. And pretty soon you've plunked in $5. And that doesn't make sense, really, because you only had won $2.50, but you've plucked it in because you're kind of waiting for that next cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So anyone who doubts the power of intermittent reinforcement needs to recognize that the entire city of Las Vegas was built on the concept of intermittent reinforcement. So it definitely is very powerful. So you want to keep that in mind as a method to use once you've got a student that knows what to do, has the skills to do it, and you're trying to establish a reinforcement plan to reward them for making headway on their behavioral goals. You might decide that you want to make it more intermittent, maybe not as frequently, or maybe they have to do the expected behavior more times before they receive the reward. That's all well and good. Recognize that the power works both ways. So it also can accidentally reinforce behaviors that you don't want. So the classic example that I give of this is a student who, let's say, is constantly asking questions in class, okay, to procrastinate instead of getting busy on their work. And so the team has decided that we're going to ignore. We're going to extinguish that behavior by ignoring it. We've given the student a number of different strategies to use to find the answer, to reread their directions, to ask a friend, a number of different strategies. And now we're just going to ignore if he or she continues to ask the questions over and over again, to procrastinate. And so we've all decided to do that. We've been ignoring it consistently, and then the student goes up to the paraprofessional in the classroom and asks that same question, and the paraprofessional says, "Oh, honey, sure, I'll help you." That is an example of intermittent reinforcement. All of the teachers involved were ignoring. The student's not getting a payout, plunking those nickels into the machine, and then turns to the paraprofessional and asks for help, and cha-ching, 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 I finally get my payout. And so what is going to happen is that student has now been reinforced that maybe I just need to ask one more time. It's the classic example of how intermittent reinforcement, we can accidentally and unintentionally end up using it and establishing a behavior. Is that classic example many of us experienced when we had toddlers at home and we were in the grocery store, and you've said, "No candy, I'm not getting you candy, I'm not getting you candy." We get up into the line to wait for our groceries to check out, and the child starts whining and asking for the candy. We're saying, "No candy, no candy." The child starts getting louder and louder. Now everybody's looking at me. Child continues to whine. We're saying, "No candy, no candy." Then the person in front of us has coupons, and we're waiting even longer, and now there's something they have to do a price check on. Our child's getting louder and crankier and whining and screaming, and suddenly we just grab the candy bar, shove it in the cart to shut the child up because we're embarrassed, right? And we go through the line and the child gets the candy bar. That's a classic example from a behavioral perspective of how sometimes we accidentally use intermittent reinforcement and reinforce a behavior that we were trying to extinguish by ignoring or by refusing to reward. So keep in mind that intermittent reinforcement is always a potential player. So if you've got a student who maybe is making some headway and then has kind of falling back behaviors where they're starting to engage again, you might just double check. Is this child getting reinforced in a way that maybe we didn't anticipate? Maybe we're sticking with it, and then someone gives in because of this situation or that, and we've accidentally reinforced the behavior we were trying to extinguish. And just keep in mind that every time we set up that contingency where the child has learned, well, wait, if I whine just a little bit longer, or if I ask one more time, or if I do this a few more minutes, maybe it will happen, then it's going to be harder to extinguish the next time we go about trying to do that. So keep that in mind. Use it as a double check if you're having some frustration with a behavior plan that's not going as you want it to. And I hope that's helpful. Have a great day.